Welcome, fellow whistle warriors. Today I am going to do a quick tutorial on how to make our next Tuesday decorative whistles. These are ice whistles that you can wear pretty much every day, all the time, and make the fact that they're a whistle a bit more inconspicuous, and they're pretty enough to wear all the time so that you have them handy whenever you need them. This would be an example of a next Tuesday ice whistle. Basically, we're just using aluminum whistles, and we are covering them with Sculpey clay or Fimo or any sort of polymer clay. And we are adding a leather necklace rope to it. And you can either make them for yourself or for friends, or you can join our Finders Keepers movement, where we are bagging up these decorative whistles, making a whistle pack with a special zine, special insert on how to post and share information about ice sightings, and some cover pages to learn a little bit more about our group and our efforts. And then we are basically hanging these from high spots around town in public. That would be tree branches or wherever, somewhere where you're not going to do any damage, where they're up high out of the reach of children and animals. And then they're left for people to find, kind of like the idea behind the painted rocks you've often seen around town. And this way we hope to spread education about what is happening with ice, as well as provide people with a whistle so that they can too participate in defending our communities. In addition to the fancier whistles, we are also going to be doing some more subtle, what we're calling charm whistles, and we'll be making whistle packs for those as well. We're also doing some basic whistle packs, which, are nothing extraordinary, but they're effective. We're using basic plastic whistles, a couple different kinds we're using. In the packet, we put in the zine I was talking about before, as well as that insert about how to responsibly post information or report information about ice activity. And these we will use for providing to other organizations, handing out at rallies, marches, meetings, etc. Keep them on hand to pass out, if we run into anybody who needs one. But these are definitely a more basic whistle pack. Today, though, I am going to be talking solely about the fancy whistles and how we've figured out how to make these. There may be other methods. We're all kind of new to this, so if you have any helpful suggestions, please don't hesitate to let us know. On our website, and probably posted in the links in our description about this video, depending on where it's posted, we will provide links to download our guides. For this, we have a next Tuesday whistle guide, which includes sort of information about what ice whistles are, what their purpose is, how to use them. But more importantly, it also includes a basic list of supplies and instructions on how to do this, written for those of you who are more experienced and don't need to watch this video. And then, of course, very importantly, it includes downloadable PDFs or printable PDFs of the zine, of the insert on how to post information responsibly, as well as the cover sheets in case you are doing the Finders Keepers version that we talked about earlier. So we'll get into it. I'll show you how we do this. Okay, so the first step is to cover the body of your whistle in the polymer clay. We've been using these sort of lightweight aluminum whistles, and you can find them at most online retailers, and they're pretty inexpensive. Basically, what you have to do is roll out a flat sheet of polymer clay. You can use a tool such as this roller and something like this acrylic board or a mat. I, however, because I've been making so many of these, actually invested in an inexpensive pasta roller, and that's how I created this flat sheet. But I will show you how to roll out a regular piece of clay from the start. First of all, I start by coating my surfaces with just a little bit of oil, not a lot, but it helps prevent the polymer clay from sticking to your mat, your board, or your roller. So I just take a paper towel and just a little bit of oil. Any oil should do. It doesn't, as long as you keep it really light, it shouldn't affect the cooking of the clay later on. So once I've poured it on my paper towel, just kind of fold it in half, squeeze it, make sure it's not, too moist. Then I take it and I clean off my surface. It's really good for cleaning these acrylic surfaces. Gets old clay, helps get old clay off so you don't have any imperfections. And then I take like a dry end of the paper towel and just try and dry it off a little, coat it evenly. I do the same thing with my roller, coat it with the oil, and then use the dry end, sort of wipe it down so it's not as slippery when you hold it. And I often use my mat, so we'll coat my mat as well. And I keep this handy because sometimes you need to clean off your tools. So you can put your skeleton, as I call it, to the side. And you need to get a piece of clay. So you need to do what's called conditioning the clay. At least that's what I believe it's called. Basically, you are just pinching and rolling your piece of clay over on itself. The whole point is to just sort of get it softer and more workable. Certain colors are harder than others. We found that we had a light pink that was like really nearly impossible to work with. So you just need to spend a few minutes working this so it's soft and mushy, and then roll it into a ball. There are certain tools that do help, although you can make use of tools from around your house pretty easily. I'm brand new to this myself. I invested a little bit of money in some tools after I sort of started to get the hang of what I was doing. Like I said, I started out with these acrylic rollers and sheets. This very sharp needle tool, hugely helpful. Use it all the time. I bought a kit that included these little tools that have little like round tips on the end of them in varying sizes. I have found those to be very helpful. The same kit included this tool. I don't know what you call it, but it's been very helpful. I use this quite often to punch the hole in the piece where the lanyard loops through. You have to have, well, I shouldn't say you have to have. I have found having an X-Acto knife is very helpful. And then in one of the kits I bought were these sort of heavy ball-tipped rollers, and these are good for, especially if you're using molds and stuff like that. For what we're doing now, you really wouldn't have much of a use for these. If you're experienced at working with polymer clay, you know that there are all sorts of tools you can buy to make beads in different shapes, but we're just going to use our hands for the most part, as well as maybe some of the tools that I just showed you. So once you've rolled your clay into a ball, you put it down on your mat or on your board, pretty much in the middle. So if you are a beginner, if you're new to this, I do recommend using one of these acrylic boards or something similar to it, because you can turn your board as you work your clay as we roll it out. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So you place your ball in the center. I usually just give it a little bit of a smush, and then you start your roller rolling back and forth from the middle out. And I just do like quarter turns, roll out. You don't want to try and get it flattened all at once. You're going to just do this several times till you get it to the thickness that you desire. Out from middle, towards yourself, another quarter turn, approximately, out from middle, towards myself. you want to make sure that it's as even as possible throughout. Although there are ways to adjust for that once we wrap the body. The point isn't that these are perfect. The point is that care went into them and that they get out into the world to help protect our communities. And we're pretty close here. So I'm going to do one last roll. There should be a pretty good thickness. One tool I did almost forget to tell you about, and this is another one that's going to be your friend. This one came with my kit. It's just like a little slicer. It can be used as a squeegee if you're doing molds, and a scraper. It has a lot of uses. It comes in very handy, so I highly recommend it. So I'm going to use it to scrape it off of the acrylic that I was rolling it on. I don't do it in one full move. I just kind of work the edges. You just keep working towards the middle, gently. If a little stays on your acrylic sheet, it's not the end of the world. As long as you don't have a giant tear, most of this is pretty forgivable, and we can fix it as we put it on the body of the whistle. Voila. As you can see, some stayed on there. That's fine. If this is your tool that you're working with, then, you know, put this piece of clay to the side, clean this off, and then you can use it again. So we place it on our mat and we move on to step number 2. For step number 2, what we are doing is taking the skeleton of the whistle, the base, and we are going to measure out the piece that we need to wrap the body. So basically what I do is I find kind of the straighter of the edges of my circle, and I line the bottom part. By bottom, I mean this open part, okay? The pointy part with the hole, I point usually away from me. So I line up the bottom part with whatever the straighter or wider edge I have on my rolled out piece. And I line it up pretty close to the bottom. I lay it with this open part of the whistle. Show you. This part of the whistle pointing straight up. And I just slightly press into the clay to make a small indent. Then I do one full roll where the whistle ends up again with the open part pointing straight up, and I make a small impression. After that, I roll the whistle off and put it to the side. Then I take my needle tool, and if you can see, there are 2 pretty distinct indents on either side. I go to the outside of each indent and I just trim away the excess clay. If the clay is forgiving enough, I'll do this nice little roll where you end up with this sort of nice little piece. And I put that to the side because sometimes I reuse that on the top part of the whistle for a decoration or for a point where I can punch a hole through to put the lanyard through. Again, you go to the other side, to the outside of the indent, just draw a straight line, pull away the excess clay. Like in this case, I didn't cut all the way through. Just go over it one more time, gently. I'll do fancy rolls since this clay is pretty forgiving. And now I have a couple pieces I could use for later if I want. Then you'll see on your indent, there's a bottom part of the indent and a top part of the indent. The top part, I typically leave alone because I don't cut it off. I don't straighten it out because you need a little extra clay at the top, meaning at this part where you've got the sort of squared off part of the whistle and the hole. You need a little extra clay in there to build up because we cannot use this hole. It's not big enough for what we're doing. So we need to cover this top part. So I always sort of leave the excess clay alone there because it sometimes comes in handy. If you don't need it all, you can always pinch it away later. But the bottom part, the part that lined up with this, I always cut into as straight of a line as possible. Once again, in that same position we were talking about before, with the open part pointing straight up, I basically line up the bottom, or maybe it would be better to say, I line up the part of the whistle that's facing down. So it's half on the edge of the clay and half off, with that open part, the bottom part of the whistle, lined up with the bottom edge of the clay. And I press down ever so slightly, and then I work up the clay in the whistle gently, like that. You want it slightly attached. Now I do just a little bit of finger molding to basically attach or adhere the clay to the whistle. You can either press down, sort of slightly rub the edge. You'll get the hang of it. Just work it down. You'll figure it out. I'm new to this as well. I just started doing this, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And there was a learning curve, but I got the hang of it. And if I can get the hang of it, I promise you, you can get the hang of it. So once you sort of have the nice attachment there, I'm going to lay it back down. And using the bottom edge of the whistle and my clean edge on the clay, I try to roll it so it's fairly well lined up. I have the clay sticking beyond the whistle ever so slightly. Again, it's very forgiving, so don't worry about perfection. Once it's rolled, we go to where the seam is, and I kind of do the same thing we just did, where I try to work the seam in a little bit, just using my fingers. If your clay's nice and soft, it should be pretty easy. Don't overly worry about the seam. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to see it, really. Not too hard. You want really gentle, relatively gentle movements. All right. So my seam is pretty much more or less gone now, except for here at the top. And I have stopped worrying about trying to get that seam perfect, since we end up working the top or putting embellishments around it. Often you can't tell. Once the seam is done, you want to roll out the whistle. I just use my hand in a gentle movement back and forth. I use long back and forth so I get a nice smooth roll and get it as even as possible. Do that a few times. Check my seam. If I don't like it, touch it up a little bit more. Roll it out one more time. Okay, so we've got the skeleton of the whistle, the aluminum whistle covered in polymer clay. We're happy with our seam, so we can go on to step 3. But first, I wanted to jump back and let you know, like, these little extra pieces you made, or if you have any excess clay left. I always keep a piece of saran wrap handy so that I can loosely, very loosely cover those and keep them, soft and pliable. Step 3. We're going to work on clearing away the opening of the whistle that you blow through and clearing away the opening of the whistle where the air comes out and creates the sound. And then we're also going to sort of work on finishing the top a little bit more. So usually I start with the bottom, this part, the opening, and I just gently press down, kind of roll it around and make it even. And you'll see, kind of gets covered up, kind of have a lump. So then I just roll it out a little bit more again. Do it one more time. And then I go in with my needle tool and I just start clearing the clay away the best I can. Pinch it away, put your clay to the side. Use whatever tools work for you. This can take a few minutes. Again, don't worry about the evenness too much. On the outside, just make sure the inside of this whistle is cleared out. And then when I have it mostly cleared out or fully cleared out, just slightly smooth the clay around the edge of the whistle just to cover it up. Not that that's important. And then this is where this tool comes in very handy. My bar tools, I use the smallest one, the smallest of the bars. There's a small ball and a medium ball. I use the medium ball, which happens to be just about the perfect width. And I just sort of work it in here just to smooth out the edges. So you'll see when you look closely in this opening, I don't think it'll show up on the video, but you'll see there's like a little piece of plastic in there that covers up about half the opening, and then there's like a open wedge that leads to this part of the whistle. When you blow in there, it's that wedge the air travels through and then comes out from this hole and creates the sound. So you want to make sure there's nothing obstructing that open wedge. If you don't see where your hole is, the part that is open on the top of the whistle, you can just sort of gently push down on your clay and you'll feel it. You'll find it. I have found this process to be the easiest for me. If you have another thought or another approach, by all means, you don't have to use my exact tools, but the point is to find the tools that allow you to clear out this part as cleanly and as best as possible. So I basically find the middle part of that hole and I sort of slice down till I feel resistance, meaning I know the blade is hitting up against the edge of the metal whistle. I try to find my lowest corner. Basically, you've got an opening that's shaped kind of like this. I am slicing down to this corner and then down to this corner. That gives me an idea of how wide the opening is. Then I go at a 90-degree angle from that cut to this edge of the whistle till I feel resistance and I know I'm hitting up against the metal. And same thing on this side. So now I know basically how wide the opening is. And I just go from those cuts, from those slices, and I run my blade right up along the metal edge of the skeleton of the metal whistle and make some slices to try and clear away these chunks of clay. Kind of do it in quadrants. Do this side. This takes practice, I'm not gonna lie. This does take practice. I've gotten much better at it over time. I've probably made about 25 or 30 whistles now, and this goes much easier now for me than it did when I first started. I just go in, I clean up those slices, and this takes me a couple tries. Sometimes I sort of clean up these edges a little bit, try and make them a little bit softer. Sometimes I use the edge of my needle tool to like soften up that edge. Just roll it along. I don't spend too much time yet doing anything like that because now I have to go back in and clear this part out. I don't know if you can see that well. This is that open wedge area I was just talking about. This is where it opens into this part of the whistle, and I need to go back in with my needle tool and be sure and clear that out. That's the part that needs to be very clear. I just use the needle tool to sort of pick it out. Now see, I did this one pretty quickly. Don't be surprised if it takes you a few tries if this is the first time you've done it. Now, just to make sure I've gotten that whole wedge opening clear, I start at this end of the whistle and I put my needle tool all the way through and just sort of scrape the edges to make sure there's nothing in a corner. Seems pretty good. Now again, you might need to do a little cleaning up again because you're going to get little crumbs that pull through and stick, and you want to roll those out. And if you need to go back in and clear a corner, and then I test it, and it works. So now we're going to work on the top. I'm going to keep things pretty simple for this one. I'm just going to sort of like pinch this off. What you have to be careful of, if you recall earlier in the video, I showed you sort of that squared off corner. it's kind of sharp, so it tends to want to poke through your clay. If it does, don't worry about it too much. Just add a little more clay, work it in with your tools or your finger, or roll it out, experiment and play. But I sort of am used to it now, so I know that that corner is right there. I can kind of start to feel it. So I'm going to try and not press too hard in that area, but I'm just going to kind of pinch off this top a little bit. I'm not going to do anything too fancy with it. I'm going to get myself a little bit more clay just for this example. And I'm going to build onto the top of this just to make it nice and thick and make it easy to punch a hole through. Not much. Yay. And I'll take the scraps that I have, include those. So I work it so it's soft, roll it into a ball. That's about how much, okay? You see that? Now, because I need to sort of fill that in and it's kind of tall, I'm going to just make a real quick sort of medium-sized rope, and then I'm going to kind of flatten it out a little. And I am just going to add it around the top here. Like that. So now we're going to punch the hole that the lanyard, the roping, the cording, whatever you're using for the necklace part, we're going to punch the holes through where you would slide that through, where it would hang from. I usually design my whistle so this part is pointing out away from the person wearing it, which means I need a hole on this side and a hole on this side. I start with my needle tool and I punch straight through. You got to make sure you have made the top part tall enough above that metal sort of square part of the whistle. You need enough clay above that so you have room to punch your hole. Otherwise, you're going to hit metal and then you're not going to get your hole all the way through and you're not going to fit a lanyard through. So I start with this needle tool. Then I move on to this tool, which has the small ball tips on the end of them. I pick one of the ones with one of the larger ball tips and I punch through one side and use very gentle. Don't try and punch all at once. Just gently try and punch through. And I drive it fairly far in so that I'm widening up that opening. You see that? And you can see my clay is starting to flatten out because I'm holding it as I punch through. You can fix that after the fact. So I do punches on both sides. And then this is where this tool comes in handy. The larger of the ball tips on this is what I typically use because I'm often using leather cording, which is pretty wide. If you're using a thinner cording, then you don't have to worry about the size. The size may do, but I have been using this for what we've been making. And this takes a little work. Again, very gently sort of rolling the tool back and forth between your fingertips. If you feel like you're getting too much resistance and can't go all the way through, then while you gently roll it, just pull it back out again and go in from the other side. I drive it fairly far in to make sure my opening is large enough. So I ended up with an opening about that big. But I have sort of flattened my piece out. So now I'm just going to go back in and try and roll that out a little bit. You may need to go back in and sort of widen up your openings a little bit. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Again, like we said, perfection is not the point. So now we have the top of our whistle, right? Now we're going to move on to step 4, which is sort of decorating the whistle, making it fun, pretty, whatever you're adding stuff to it that you want. Although you could be finished at this point. If you like what you have, by all means, bake it and be done. You can skip the next step and go to the baking step. So yeah, we'll move on to step 4, okay? Step 4 is decorating the whistle. There are all sorts of things you can buy if you want. Different, machines that make beads or different shapes. Molds. We use molds quite often. Those come in especially handy if you're good with liquid Sculpey. We have made pieces like crowns, flowers, owls, all sorts of stuff. And we often use those to decorate our whistles, but you can go very, very basic as well. And we're gonna do basic today. So to do basic, I just have picked another color of polymer clay that I think goes nicely with the color of our body. I like this sort of peacock turquoise color. I think this goes really pretty with this rose gold. And, you know, just break off a piece. Doesn't really matter the size. Depends on how much you want to do, how fancy you want to get. And again, you have to condition it, work it so it's softer. This will take a couple minutes. Just squeezing between your fingers, sort of folding it back on itself, squeezing till it's soft and pliable. This color is pretty nice because it conditions fairly quickly. Gets soft pretty quick. So I don't really have a plan for this whistle. I'm going to just kind of play with it as we go along. But I think I'm going to make a collar to cover up this seam. I'm going to take off a pinch of this color. Yay big. If I need to add more, I can. And then roll it into a ball. And then I'm going to make basically a rope. So I do that. I place my ball down on a mat or a board and just using one finger and a light touch sort of roll from one end of the rope to the other. So you can see it's starting to lengthen out. Start at one end, go to the other, and back again, trying to keep the width of the rope fairly even. I do this a few times till I get it to a length that I think will fit around that collar. If you're keeping it round, then you want to make sure it will fit the circumference. If you're going to flatten it out, it can be a little bit shorter because you will flatten it out and it will grow in length. I'm going to use my roller tool. You can use your acrylic board. You could use, the cutter squeegee scraper thing, anything that you can to get it flat. I am actually going to try just going lengthwise and applying even pressure. And then I'm going to roll it. Oh, I want it a little flatter than that. Okay, that's pretty good. I actually want it to be a little bit flatter. So this time I'm just going to roll from middle out, middle towards me. I've got a nice piece there. I'm going to use my needle tool to give myself a straight end. Even if it doesn't fit all the way around, that's okay because it'll be towards the back. So I start with the front, try and find the middle of my new piece of clay. And I lay it on. Now, let me say this. You need to sort of find a way to work this in just slightly so it attaches, or you can use little tiny pieces of clay balls on like kind of the edges and work those in, or you can use a little bit of Sculpey glue. In this case, I'm going to use just a little bit of Sculpey glue just to make sure I have a good adhesion. Just a little bit. A little goes a long way. I tend to myself like to use one of the larger ball tip tools to kind of spread that glue out just a little bit. If you have long nails, be careful. You're going to make a nail indent occasionally. Find the middle. Put my collar on. What I like about using the Sculpey glue is that I have a little freedom to move things around if they're not positioned exactly where I like them. Now you can see I didn't make it quite long enough to wrap all the way around. No big deal. I'm just gonna work And take a tool like this and work these edges down and into the back so it adheres like that. So now I have a nice collar. I would like to make a few dots in my collar. So I'm going to take one of my ball tip tools, put a little oil on it, and then just make a few decorative dots. Gently sort of pressing in, rolling the tool back and forth between your fingers as you push in and as you pull out. I'm just going to do this all the way around. Trying to space it. I'm sort of eyeballing it. Again, perfection is not the point. And I personally am just going to go through, press those down, make them a little softer. Now I've got like a little decoration on the collar. I think I will also do a cool like rope wrapping around the whistle. So I'm going to take a chunk of clay, condition it, roll it, and then make a rope. Now this rope I want pretty skinny, so this is going to take me a minute. Length doesn't matter, we can always trim it to size. See, this is pretty long, so I can cut away some of this that I know I don't need because I still want to go thinner. Trying my best to keep the rope as even as possible. Again, I still have excess and I want to go a little bit thinner. Cut a little more away. So it's looking pretty good. So you don't ever want to obstruct this hole or the opening at this end, and you want to not necessarily get too close to the edges of this until you have more experience and can test it. So for now, because we don't want to obstruct these, I'm going to place this sort of starting back here on the back side and keeping it away from the mouth opening, sort of slightly pinched down, and I'm just going to twist wrap this. And I'm going to have it meet up with the collar at the top. Very simple design, nothing fancy, but adds a nice touch, makes it look a little bit more like jewelry. I'm going to work very slightly so it's barely noticeable the edge of this clay, edge of the rope, into the body and the collar just to make sure it attaches well. And then on this one, I don't want to rub or flatten that piece out into the body of the clay. So I'm just going to use one of my ball tools. Just make a little circle indent, which should also make it attach better. So there you have it. You've got a whistle. So this is the point at which I test it. And it works. Don't worry, at the end, we're going to clean that off. So now we're ready for step 5, which is baking. And just before you bake, you'll find sometimes this top part wiggles, gets off center. Just work it best you can to the position you want it in. Okay, so now we're ready for step 5, which is baking. Okay, so now we're on to baking, step number 5. The most important thing is your temperature, 275, at least for Sculpey. I'm not quite sure what Fimo might be. So double check that. Whatever the temperature the instructions say on the polymer clay that you're using, as long as you keep your oven at that temperature, if you bake them a little too long, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't scorch them. I've been able to bake and rebake and use things over and over, add things to a piece that's already baked, And as long as I keep it at 275, I've never gotten scorching or anything like that. The standard rule, I believe, is about 15 minutes of baking time per 1/4 inch of clay thickness. So since ours vary in thickness, like this one has a pretty thick piece up here, but around the skeleton of the whistle, it's pretty thin. So I have been, at least in my oven, I've been using about 18 to 21 minutes. If it's on the thicker side, I do about 20, 21 minutes. If it's sort of standard, then like this one here, I will do for about 18 minutes. All of mine I do for about 18 minutes. Line your baking sheet. This is also very important. Line your baking sheet with parchment paper. I have a small baking sheet because I use a like toaster oven / air fryer, which has a bake setting, and it's worked great. So I use this small tray, and you just line your whistles. If you have a whistle that you need to sort of have sitting straight up and down when it bakes so that it doesn't lean too heavily on one of the smaller pieces and bend it out of line or something, then you can use like scrap pieces of parchment paper or other bakeable items that won't melt or, change shape to try and sort of prop up your piece. I'm sure there's probably special things out there. I haven't done the research yet. I have simply sort of relied on just folding pieces of parchment paper to get the desired result I'm looking for, which is what I'm going to do with this piece. Sometimes it takes a couple tries. So you just line your baking sheet with your whistles. These are whistles that me and my colleague made, if I didn't mention that already. And I am going to put these in a preheated 275-degree oven and bake them for about 18 minutes. Then when they're done, I will take them out of the oven pretty much immediately and then let them cool for at least about as long as I baked them for. And then we will go on to step 6, which is putting the lanyard through your whistle to turn it into a necklace. Okay, we have finished baking our whistle, which means we're going on to step number 6. But first, let's take a look. Let's see, it's all hardened up, nice and secure. Looks good. Color turned out nice. Not a huge change in color, but occasionally you'll see that the colors shift just slightly with baking, but not much at all. So let's give it a test. Works. Great. Okay, we'll go on to step 6, which is putting the lanyard through the necklace. Okay, so now we're on to step 6, a really simple one, which is putting cording or string or whatever you're using to hang this as a necklace. You're going to string it through your whistle. Just for reference, this is one we did previously. On this one, you can see we did a special knot that allows the necklace to be longer or shorter, depending on the wearer's preference. And these knots just slide along the necklace in order to accomplish that. I'm not going to do that today. It's a little more complicated. Maybe at some point I'll do another video on how to tie those. In the meantime, if you want to do a knot like that, just do a search on YouTube or on the internet. Look for like sliding knot necklace or something like that. You'll find all sorts of tutorials. For the sliding knot necklace, I typically cut a little over 36 inches of leather cording. That allows it to be really long for people who want it quite long, but with the sliding knot, it also allows you to shorten it if you want to wear it short. For our purposes today, I'm going to keep it simple and just do a simple knot. This one I did not cut quite as much leather for, maybe 32 inches or so. This almost takes no explanation. You just slide your cording through the whistle. I typically try and find my halfway point to hang the whistle. Line those up, find the halfway point, and then I just do a very simple twisted knot. I don't know if there's a special name for this or not. I'm not a knot expert. And voila, you've got your necklace. Hangs nicely, easy to grab, and works. So last steps are going to be putting this together into a whistle packet. So we'll move on to that step, making the whistle packet next. The final step is to put our packets together. We have two different kinds of packets that we put together using this kind of whistle. One is our finders keepers, and one is our Craftivism. So our finders keepers is the one I spoke about earlier, where you put the packet together and then you take it out into a public space somewhere and you hang it up from like a tree branch or somewhere up high, because we don't want children to get these or animals to get these. These are meant for adults. So the finders keepers is sort of a fun way, kind of like people do the painted rocks that you find around town. This is a fun way to get the whistles out to complete strangers who you might not normally know or interact with, and hope that they take the whistle and keep it and maybe make their own and do this. The other one, the Craftivism one, is basically the same whistle, but that packet is intended for people that you know personally, groups or organizations you're working with. Basically, you're handing that whistle off to somebody you know. So it has slightly different cover sheet and doesn't need the special touches for hanging it up. We're going to start with the Craftivism one. If that's not your intent, then you can skip this and go on to the final part where I talk about the finders keepers whistles. So starting with the Craftivism, we've got our whistle. We need some sort of bag. Like I said, since these are being handed off, you don't necessarily need a weatherproof bag like a Ziploc bag. You can use whatever you want. But in this case, I'm going to use the smaller Ziploc bag that I have on hand. We use a larger one for the finders keepers because of having to cinch the bag and hang it. In this case, a smaller bag is just fine. First, you're going to want to make sure that you download our next Tuesday Craftivism whistle guide and packet. At the end of that guide, you will find several sheets that you can print out. They're meant for printing front and back. So if you don't have that capability at home, try your local library. Lots of libraries offer free or discounting printing. So the final pages will have your zine insert, your how to post or how to report ice sightings responsibly. And then it'll have a little cover sheet that you can attach to the bag so that whomever you're giving it to knows what it is, and there's a little bit more information. And it also drives them to the site where they can come and learn how to make their own. So like I said, in that packet, you've got your cover sheet. It is English on one side, Spanish on the other. So we're just going to trim this out. If you have a paper cutter, obviously that makes this a lot easier and a lot quicker. We've got about 6 to a sheet in that guide, so you can make several. Here is our cover sheet, or what we're calling our cover sheet. Then you have your zine. And there are instructions in the guide on how to fold the zine. Again, it's meant to be printed front and back, English on one side, Spanish on the other. When it's all folded, it looks something like this. And just a little helpful hint, when I am done folding it, I usually run, like a pen or something to just sort of give these edges a nice, strong crease. If it's not perfect, don't worry about it. As you can see, this one is not perfect. So then we put that to the side. And then the final piece that you have for this packet is a little insert about how to responsibly share ice sightings or ice activity. This is also something that is 6 to a sheet, so you can make several from one sheet. Again, if you have a paper cutter, makes it easier and quicker. In this case, I'm just going to trim it out with scissors. Okay, so for a quick review, for the Craftivism whistles that you're basically giving out to friends, family, people you know, or organizations you know, you need a small bag. You need to download the guide and print out the inserts. The inserts include the zine, a small insert about how to share information about ice activity responsibly, and then your cover sheet that goes on the bag. So when you're all set, I often wrap my whistle, the leather cord around the whistle because it protects it a little bit. Put your whistle in the bag. You put your zine in the bag, and you put your sharing insert in the bag. And again, since these aren't going to be sitting out in the elements, you could just tape your cover sheet right to the outside. I prefer to tape my cover sheet to the inside, and I find packing tape works the best. You don't have to go crazy. Just place it so that the person you're giving it to can see what it is. Again, this is also Spanish on one side, English on the other. I typically tape it in the bag so that the English side points out. I just put it in the bag, tape it to the bag. After you put everything together, just gently squeeze the air out, close up your bag, and you're all set. If you've chosen to do the Finders Keepers version of our whistle packet, then you want to start with downloading our Finders Keepers guide. There are instructions in here for people who are experienced at working with polymer clay on how to make their whistles, but more importantly, the last several pages are printable pages that you will need for your packet. Those pages include the zine and instructions on how to fold the zine. The zine is double-sided, English on one side, Spanish on the other. And when it's all said and done and you've folded it, it looks something like this. I usually fold it so that the English side is readable, but you can open it up, reverse it, and refold it so the Spanish side is facing out if you want. And just a quick helpful hint, once I'm done folding, I take, the end of a scissors or anything like a pen, and I just make sure these creases are nice and tight. Just sort of keeps it together a little bit better. So for this packet, I use larger weatherproof bags, a Ziploc bag in this case. This is a 1 gallon Ziploc bag. The reason being, these are often left out in the elements and you don't want anything to get wet or frozen. So you definitely want something weatherproof in this case. And you want it large enough because you're going to probably end up cinching the bag a little bit to make the loop that it hangs from. So first we start with our whistle. I usually wrap the leather around it just to give it a little extra protection. They're not terribly fragile, but they're a little fragile. So it gives it a little extra protection. So I put my whistle in my bag. Then I do my insert about posting or sharing information responsibly. If you have a paper cutter, this will go a lot quicker. There's 6 to a sheet. In this case, I am just trimming it out. So you put this insert in your bag. The next insert will be your zine. You put that inside the bag as well. Then you have your cover sheets. For this packet, there are 2 cover sheets. You tape one to one side of the bag and one to the other. They are double-sided. One is in English, one is in Spanish. So again, if you have a paper cutter, this goes fast. There's 6 to a sheet, so you can make several. In this case, I'm just trimming it out with scissors. There are little lines to help guide you. Remember, perfection is not the point. So now we're ready for the cover sheets. I grab my bag. I'm going to start with the English one. You want the part that says Finders Keepers facing out of the bag. I find that packing tape works the best, and you definitely want to tape these to the inside to protect them from the weather. You don't need to go crazy with the taping, but you want it to stand up so people can see it when it's hung up. So, finders keepers points out. I usually put this on the clear side of the Ziploc bag. You want to put it not all the way at the bottom, but close to the bottom. You don't want it too high because we're going to end up cinching the bag. So you want to make sure it's low enough that you can still cinch and it is still readable. Now the Spanish version goes on the other side of the bag. You want to make sure the part that faces out is the part that reads El que I'm terrible at this, I apologize. El que lo encuentra solo queda. You tape it, flip the bag over. Again, you want to go towards the bottom, not all the way to the bottom, but towards the bottom. Tape it in there. Gently squeeze out the air and close your bag. Now for the finishing touches. We're going to use a couple lengths of ribbon. Any color, whatever you have around, whatever's handy, doesn't really matter. So for the first one, for the part where we cinch the bag, I eyeball it. It's probably 18 inches to 2 feet. And I put the English side facing up. Tie this so it's cinched, but the cover sheet remains readable. And you can just knot it, or you could make it pretty with a bow. We'll make this one pretty with a bow. And then you need to make the loop from which you'll be able to hang it. That one, again, is probably, maybe this one you want to make somewhere around 2 to 3 feet. Doesn't really matter. Maybe 3 feet's too long. So all I've done for these is I just knot it on one side of that cinch and then flip it over. Knot it to the other side of the cinch. And you're done. So this loop, again, just to explain, is what you can use to hang it from like a tree branch or a sign or something up high, out of the reach of, small children and animals. These are really intended for adults or older children at least. So yeah, try and hang it up high. I wouldn't leave it on the ground or down low where kids could find it. So there you go. Thanks.